in this module, we are going to be talking about some basic techniques on how you can edit your audio to make it sound as good as possible. So let's go ahead and go over to the computer. So now whenever it comes to editing, I usually like to go ahead and take care of the sound first. So for example, there are a few plugins that I go ahead and I utilize. I listen to it first, of course, but there are a few go-tos that are usually always taken care of. So the first thing is first is an EQ, which stands for equalizer. Most audio editing programs are going to have it. It's going to be listed as EQ. When you click on it, they're going to bring you up something that looks like this. Most EQs look exactly the same. They have bands that you can attenuate, which means to cut, or boost, which means to raise them up and make those frequencies louder. So a little bit of an intro. All sound has a frequency, which basically means that it falls within a spectrum of lows to mids to highs. Lows being bass, mids being mids, and highs being treble, your higher range, your higher frequencies. So not all of those sound good and not all of them need to be there. So let's just jump right in. What I do is I will cut the lower frequencies, which means to make them quieter. So I listen and cut.
Businesses would get case studies when
That sounds ridiculous.
they want to
So
inform, educate, and influence prospects. And
just to where you start to tame the sound. I do that for the lows and I do that for the
I think
highs.
one of the most important things about a case study is they're essentially...
All right, so you just push it to where you think it sounds good, where it starts to cut out some of the unnecessary frequencies, some of that mud in the lower end, and some of that overly airy quality in the higher end. This is where you get into the nitty-gritty. So these middle bands control where the human voice lies. Let me just change that to be a bell. So it changes where the human voice actually lies. So what we want to do is we want to be very careful with these bands, the ones in the middle, and I always like to cut before I boost. So here's a little 30-second trick. What I will do is there's this thing called Q factor that basically dictates how wide that curve is. So when I make my Q factor, oh, that's 3. When I make the Q factor narrow or very wide, what I'll do is I'll make it very narrow, turn up the gain, so make it very loud, and what you're going to be listening for is where those frequencies start to sing out to you, where they really start to just have an annoyingly high quality, and then you want to cut them out. So let's take a listen.
Your customers are telling prospects how you and your software as a service, for example, address their challenges.
All right, so never cut out the first frequency. That's their principal frequency. It's where their voice mainly sits. If you cut that out, it's going to sound too weird. So move on to the next one.
Got rid of their pain points and delivered measurable, tangible benefits. And that is far more believable than your company's sales reps saying.
All right, so now we're going to go on to the next band, and then you would just do this for all of them. You'd go through and you'd cut it all out. I'm not going to go ahead and walk through the whole process because I want you guys to not be here for 5 years. So that's what I do with the EQ. From there, I might actually just slap a preset on if I have one. I do not. It's okay. So from there, what I will do is I will go and I will work with a de-esser. If there are any popped S's, just like I talked about in the technique module, then you want to de-ess them here. So let's go ahead and throw on a de-esser just to show you guys what it does. So a de-esser is when you get that S sound. You can listen to the S's only, and what you see is it's turned around and it's boosted the frequency where you have the S's. You can also de-ess in the equalizer, the EQ that I just had up, but this is a more specialized tool. So you can listen to the S's only. You can change the amount that you want to cut them or boost them, and then you can change the frequency so that you can hear where those S's truly live. So if I go ahead and listen through.
It's not like hugely intimate, but certainly otherwise private details about their business and success rates and things like that. It certainly goes a long way.
Well, and I think you hit on something that is worth emphasizing, that the
So let's go ahead and reduce now.
fact that a customer of the
You see the
customer
reduction.
is going publicly on record saying positive things about your product and their experience with you, no one is going to put.
So that is how a de-esser works. And you would just take it and you would work it. You would keep listening. You'd find where those S's really lie. You'd make that frequency. You'd move it to where you need it to go, and you would cut it out. Notice you cannot boost, because this is not about boosting frequencies like EQ. It's about specifically and surgically cutting out those S's in order to get rid of it. That's also why you can only have one. Those S's will lie specifically at one frequency. It's up to you to find where that frequency lives and to reduce it. So the next thing that I would go ahead and typically utilize is some type of compressor. Now, I don't use a compressor in every single circumstance, and we're not going through it. It would take years to go through it, but we are going to talk about it a little bit. Boom. Okay. So, finally found it.
Their
This is a
professional
compressor.
reputation on the line if they don't truly.
All right, so what does a compressor do? So as you can see here, you are seeing the actual dynamics of the sound, how loud and how quiet it is. Here you can see that it's quieter because it's lower, and here you can see that it's louder. Usually you don't want these peaks to have a huge range. This isn't music. You're listening to somebody's voice. So what a compressor will do is it will take those highs and it will squash them down so that they are quieter at a certain range that you yourself set. You can set how quickly it takes those and squashes them down, how long it holds them, or how long it holds that signal. You can set the threshold, so it won't start until after it gets to this certain dB, and then the ratio. So for however many it actually goes from that, it squashes it down by that amount. A higher ratio is going to give you a really, really squashed sound. So let me give you an example of that. You want a light ratio, but this is what a high ratio does.
Truly believe that that's how they benefited from that product or service.
Yeah, and
So it
it's a little
squashes
bit
that
different
sound down.
than.
It squashes that sound down. If I go ahead and lower that ratio.
It's something with your mic.
With my mic?
I think so.
This one, she was having audio problems. Skip ahead.
Tell me, is that kind of going on in the background, or?
Yeah, I think that the reviews
compression is a lot
that you're
less.
talking
Let's raise
about, you're absolutely right. Nobody knows if someone's been paid or compensated or incentivized.
So that is what the ratio does. It basically says how much it's going to squash it down by how many decibels. So you want to be very light. You want to be very light with all of this, whether it be threshold, attack, release, the ratio, because if you can make it sound crazy if you are too harsh with all of this stuff.
In some way. On top of that.
Exactly. So you have to be extremely careful when it comes to this, but usually I'll also do some light compression. So what I will do whenever it comes to editing all of this stuff, well, to mixing, editing is just cutting out all of the mistakes, but I will go ahead and I will put a de-esser on, I will EQ, and I will use some light compression in order to bring the voice to life and in order to make it more lively, in order to make it better for the audience. But this is what I do when it comes to editing the audio. Thank you so much for joining in, and I will see you guys for the end.